Hi there. Today we're going to be learning a little bit about photography techniques and how these are used not just to create pretty art, but also to help convey some implied messages. I'm just going to go ahead and start our presentation. You should be taking notes as you listen to this video with the graphic organizer that I've provided to you. So here's a media analysis. We're learning specifically about photography techniques. So there's a really common saying, which is the message is to move. That's oftentimes what people say about art, is that, some people view art as just being for art's sake, for beauty, but a lot of people look at art as being something, a vehicle to help move an audience to feel a certain way or to do a certain thing. So, like painters, sketch artists, and musicians, photographers have the power to move their audiences emotionally. Using various different techniques, photographers often implicitly and explicitly compose moods or tones in their artwork. Sometimes it's more obvious than others. So, in order to really understand the point of all of these techniques and why they're being used, it's important to understand these two terms, mood and tone, because in using different techniques, photographers are able to help create a mood in a photograph or a tone in a photograph. So, the definition of mood is a distinctive emotional quality or character. The mood of the music was almost funereal. So that's a general sort of feeling that you get when you look at something. Tone is used very similarly. So the definition of the word tone is an attitude towards the material and or readers. Tone may be playful, formal, intimate, angry, serious, ironic, outraged, baffled, tender, serene, depressed. I mean, you don't have to remember the definitions of these words per se, but it's important that you have an understanding of how they work within a piece of art to help you understand why we're looking at the techniques that we are. So the first technique that we'll talk about that you'll oftentimes see in photography is distance of shot. And there are three main distances of shot, and each tells a different story. Now, the concept of distance of shot really is a long spectrum, and there's lots of different distances, but for simplicity's sake, we will focus on these three: a long shot, a medium shot, and a close-up shot. Long-distance shots are typically used when the photographer wants to show a large, vast area. Everything seems kind of small and there's not a ton of detail. Long-distance shots usually lack a sense of intimacy because you can't see all of the details because it is taken from so far away. It's really just a way to give the viewer a wider and more general impression of an area. If you're ever watching a movie, you might notice that opening scenes oftentimes are done in a long-distance shot because it helps the audience feel like they are starting off as an outsider in the story, but then as the person creating the movie comes to a closer and closer shot, it makes you feel like you started on the outside of the story, but you're now joining into the story and you're part of the story itself. The next type of shot that we're going to discuss is a medium distance shot. So medium distance shots typically show, for example, a person's upper body, perhaps even their full body, but with not a ton of space in the background. They would be taking up almost the entire frame. So medium shots neither show an overarching scene nor many details. The third type of shot that we're going to talk about is a close-up shot. And don't worry, guys, we are going to see examples of all these in just a moment. So a close-up shot shows every tiny detail of the person or thing that's being pictured in the photograph. These scenes can be very intimate because it feels like, as the viewer, you're just millimeters away from whatever it is that you're viewing. You feel physically really close to it. So I have three different pictures that I'm going to show you, all sort of thematically linked, which use different distances of shot and I think tell very different stories. So this is an example of a long distance shot. You can see that there is a lot of people and ruckus happening in the background, but based on what's blurry and not blurry, we can tell that the main subjects are the two people that are on the ground. So every time I do this presentation with live students, I ask them, how does this picture make you feel? And what do you think is happening in this picture? Oftentimes the response is that we see two lovers sort of wrapped up in their feelings for one another, that they do not even notice all of the chaos that is surrounding them because their love is so real and in that moment. But then, as much as I love hearing that heartfelt version of this story, I always like to laugh and tell them that truthfully what this photograph is a picture of two people that were running around trying to get out of all of this mass chaos. It was during a riot, and they actually fell down, and he's not kissing her at all. He's just trying to lift her up. Now, the point to this story is to say that when you use a long distance shot, sometimes the details can be skewed. Sometimes you don't have a full understanding of what's happening in the photograph simply because you're so far away that you can't be certain what you're seeing necessarily. Here's an example of a medium distance shot. And I, again, asked my students, how does this picture make you feel? What do you think is happening here? So this is from a pretty popular movie, The Notebook. And a lot of people say that they can feel the passion in this photo. It's got a very passionate mood that we see. That because we're a little bit closer up from our previous picture, we can see details like, the definition of the muscles in Ryan Gosling's arms, and we can see the look in both of their faces a little bit more clearly. It looks almost like they're feeling anguish. Perhaps they've been apart for so long, and this is a moment when they just are reunited and their passion is taking over. Again, we can come up with a few more details of what's happening in this little story that this photograph is telling because we're a little bit closer and because we can see more details. I'm going to move on now to an example of a close-up shot. So again, here it is another kiss picture. I know you guys must think I'm obsessed, right? This one is much more close-up. And when I ask students how they feel when they look at this, they feel that this is perhaps even more sensual than the other two pictures that we showed. And I say, what's happening in this picture? If you had to say, what's the story that's happening here? Students always talk about details like the fact that you can see that the girl's eyes are closed. And, if the media and movies tell us everything, we know that when your eyes are closed, it must be a passionate kiss. But then they look to the guy and they say, well, his eyes are open just a little bit. And maybe that even extends that story a little bit more and says, it's totally passionate and he's feeling the moment, but at the same time, he's so in love with her that he just needs to keep looking at her even through the kiss because she's so gosh darn beautiful, right? As the viewer, you feel almost like your face is right in there with them, and it feels a little awkward. At least I feel a little bit awkward, like I'm trespassing into a moment that I shouldn't be. But that, again, just I think emphasizes the sensuality of the scene. So there you go, 3 different kiss pictures, all sort of being told differently and different levels of detail based on the distance of shot that's being used.